What's up, everyone? Here's my thoughts on Civil War, that new controversial movie. It's kind of up for grabs. This movie is really up for interpretation, and so here are some of my thoughts. Civil War is a visceral, gritty look into what it might look like if Americans were at modern war, but with one another. The gunfights, the death, the unpredictable intensity can be pretty palpable at times. Like most stories where people are reduced to primal survival instincts and the darker sides of humanity in order to survive, there's a lot of potential here to really hold a magnifying glass up to American citizens in the hopes of getting them to ask the questions of the nature of their loyalty to their fellow compatriots. Is any of this worth it? Are we fighting for the right reasons? Are we making enemies out of brothers? Have we lost our way in the midst of black and white, right and wrong? These are all questions I would be asking myself if this movie had actually had the spine to dig deeper and truly say something about the current state of mankind. Unfortunately, it all ends up being kind of superficially jarring with no apparent message or reason for being in the end. I don't think any two people will walk away from this movie having seen the same film, because it almost feels like it's presented as a blank coloring book. Yes, the outline is there, the plot is plotted out in bullet points, but the flesh and meat of it all is simply up to the viewers. You have to do the legwork this time, guys. The optimist in me wants to give some credit to the direction of this movie, if that was the intended result. However, I can't help but feel that when it comes down to it, taking the easy way out with a ridiculously on-the-nose title such as Civil War, released in 2024, feels almost more like a cash grab in one of those engagement farming tweets that we see these days, where the original author has nothing of value to truly say, but instead their ultimate intention is to rile up the populace for reaction farming. And the result might be perhaps leading us closer to an actual civil war, because this movie doesn't really provide any moral takeaway. It leaves people feeling kind of confused and vaguely depressed. And I don't think that's a feeling a movie should give you when you walk out of the theater. It seems pretty clear to me that this movie doesn't want to answer any real questions. It doesn't want to even lay the questions out clearly for you. It's like a jigsaw coloring book where you can see the bits and pieces of the whole from a top-down point of view, but the director commits a cardinal sin in asking his audience to do the legwork of the nuance and detail for him. With that being said, let's take a closer look at this deceptively controversial film, Civil War. The movie follows a ragtag group of journalists who are dead set on making their mark in the history books. The main duo are middle-aged professionals who want to make their way to Washington, D.C. to interview the president one last time before he's presumably killed by the opposing Western forces. And how is Joel so sure the president will be killed soon? Well, don't know. The movie never tells us, just like how it doesn't tell us what the Western forces or the U.S. military are even fighting about. It's vaguely mentioned that there's been a secession, a massacre or two, and then boom, American Civil War II. We don't know why they're fighting this time. It's just happening. Go along with it. Okay. I think the people kind of need more than that. Joel's partner Lee is a world-famous photographer for taking a historic photo at the titular Antifa massacre. Great. And so together they form an overly ambitious journalistic duo who think the president will give them the time of day if they can just make it to DC. Right. That makes perfect sense. For a 2024 movie entitled Civil War, with mention of an Antifa massacre, and a president who inarguably bears more resemblance to a recent president despised by the media, hint hint, this movie gives you offensively little context as to why any of this is happening. Almost none, to be exact. It's just happening, accept it, there are no reasons. This could very easily happen one day soon, so take this as a warning. Why though? Because look, we filmed it and put it on camera. Can't you imagine it happening? It all seems very pretentious from the get-go. Even though there are some aspects of it that I did enjoy, like depicting familiar American gathering places such as malls, parking lots, schools, suburbs, a quaint main street, all devoid of life. As a fan of liminal horror, I find this type of aesthetic and mental exercise interesting, as it promotes the aftermath of a situation and forces your mind to kind of rewind the tape and fill in the gaps. It's almost like taking the idea show don't tell to its max, maybe to a detriment, show the aftermath, not the show. While I find it mildly interesting, it also feels all too exhausting. Modern Hollywood can't help themselves but to subvert the audience's expectations, in this case, even in the art of storytelling itself. If I had to say something positive about this movie, it would be the fact that it has so little message that it actually detracts from the ability to sympathize with the journalists as a protagonist in the movie. They're all self-centered, surface-level thinking clout chasers who just want to follow, the action in hopes of being relevant in a world that likely would have shot them on the spot for getting in the way of any militia. Instead, we see them taking pictures in the heat of combat with minimal consequences. until the end, that is. They're overly protected in a way that feels pretentious, especially when you consider the braggadocious, undeserved haughtiness of most modern journalists today. The movie needed to work overtime to get me to sympathize with its main characters, and in the end it failed miserably. I didn't want anyone to win. I didn't care. I didn't want anyone to lose. I would assume that the normal human reaction to another American Civil War would be, wait, why is this happening? Where did we go wrong? How can we stop it from getting worse? Instead, we're left to await the troops' arrival into DC, where presumably the conclusion they hope for is awaiting them. What ends up happening might be the conclusion they were hoping for, but certainly not the audience. Jesse, this young college graduate journalist, gets so caught up in the adrenaline of the combat that she sacrifices the safety of everyone around her. And in the end, it even costs the life of one of her very heroes. Yet she shows no remorse for the death. She ends up getting the money shot of the president being killed, and we're left mulling over the fact that we were forced to sit through a movie that tries to get us to root for this terrible human being. She didn't deserve this shot. They have no redeeming moral qualities. The warring factions seem to be better people than the journalists. At least to me. Because at least they're fighting for something, anything. You decide, stupid audience. There's nothing quite like leaving a movie theater feeling demoralized, condescended to, and all the while mesmerized by flashy cinematography. It's definitely a lukewarm feeling. No amount of dazzling lights or jarring death scenes can overcome the fact that this movie is afraid of itself. It has nothing to say. You're more likely to gain insight about the current state of an American Civil War II here on YouTube than in theaters. So take this movie with a grain of salt. Again, if I were to give a positive to this movie, it would be that it does get you to ask questions, but it also feels like the movie did no work to set you up for asking the right questions. So, 5 out of 10. If you liked what you heard, please leave a like and a comment, subscribe if you haven't. Let me know what you think. I'll see you on the next one, where we try to get Austin translation.